I met my Lena, my wife of almost 15 years ago, at school the following Monday after I threw a party at my parents' farm for a group of my buddies because they were away. I had a friend of my parents who worked for us, and he brought me a couple of bottles of sour puree. My cousin Terry got drunk with angry eyes, which didn't take long for him at that age. Instead of staying and getting some sleep, he decided it was time for him to go home. I managed to get the keys to his truck from him, but he thought he was smarter than me. The asshole ran out the front door, thinking he could still walk the 5 miles home, so I let him. I think the young lady found him about a mile away crawling in the ditches when she went to get the family mail from the mailbox because he couldn't get up anymore. That's how I got this Rubik before he left my parents' house. After she got her father, a pretty principled man in his own way, involved, she brought my cousin to his parents' house. My aunt, my father's sister, had to clean up after him because Terry vomited several times. Thanks to his stupid behavior, my parents found out about this, and I was put under arrest. In their eyes, I had violated their trust in me. I was a horse donkey. It didn't matter what I said because they believed the worst. Eventually, my aunt told me what happened. She managed to turn it into the worst thing humanity could do since they killed Jesus Christ. I was mincemeat. I corrupted her son, a choir boy who sang like an angel in church every Sunday. If only she knew the truth about her son's behavior. No one can do anything if a person is blinded by his faith and cannot see reality. I accepted it and did my time. It taught me at a young age that the truth doesn't matter most of the time. What matters is what people believe. From that moment on, I changed the way I treated everyone I knew. My father said that I was old before my time because I walked completely differently than I used to. A girl I had never seen before approached me in the hall just before my afternoon class started, catching my attention with the words, "I heard you throw wild parties at your parents' farm with half-naked girls running around. Are you so irresponsible that you let your friends get away when they can't walk 10 feet?" "Who are you?" I asked, "and what the hell are you talking about?" "My name is Lena LeBlanc, and I found one of the people who attended your wild parties crawling in the ditch outside my parents' house because he couldn't even stand up to walk." I thought to myself, lady, if you only knew how far from the truth this is, you would know how stupid you are talking. But I wasn't going to tell her that because I knew that she believed it would only improve my reputation among the crowd in our small town of Jackson. So I kept my mouth shut. "It's not as bad as you making noises," I said, looking at her young hot body. "But if you'd like to volunteer to be one of them the next time you host a Saturday afternoon party, I'm open to it." Her face turned red. She muttered, "Can't you tell I'm not that kind of girl?" "No, maybe not, but you want to be like that. Your mouth says one thing," I said, "but your eyes and body language tell me a different story." "Jet King, you're an asshole," she said. Her face beat red. "True, but horses are made to be ridden," I said. She punched me hard in the face and walked away in a fit of pure rage, but I saw the smile on her face before she even landed. I stood and laughed. I knew my reputation was set for the year. Thanks to her lips, I became one of the most popular in school that year. "She has no idea, does she?" said my cousin Terry, who witnessed the whole thing. "Not a bit," I said. "What the hell did you tell her?" "How should I know, asshole?" he said. "You're the fucking idiot who decided to play shitty poker with me for straight shots after we smoked." I started laughing because my cousin Terry didn't know I had stacked the deck. Having said that, we headed to our first class. From that moment on, a game began between me and Lena. I played with Lena every damn chance I got, getting everything I could out of her. Every time I saw her in a public situation, I made sure that it was obvious to anyone who saw me looking at her that I was undressing her with my eyes. It became so noticeable that one of her friends saw me and started playing the song "Hungry Eyes" on her cell phone when she caught me. It was a way for me to get revenge for Lena LeBlanc punching me in the face. Yes, I was a bit of a jerk, but I had fun. Besides, she had a body that wouldn't stop. It radiated so much sexiness from her that I wasn't the only one drooling over her with lust. I was just a fool honest enough to admit it. If one of her friends asked me what I was doing, I would answer them honestly by saying, I'm interested in her, but Lena told me we'll be in a relationship when hell freezes over, and until that happens, the best thing is that I respect her wishes. That only upset Lena even more because they wanted to know what I had done to make it happen. When she explained all this to them, she would laugh at what had happened, or they would tease her about her reaction. Lena LeBlanc was hot in my eyes. Her roots were in the deep south, and hurricane damage forced her family to move into the heartland of the flyover country. She was a red-haired Cajun girl with a body that I dreamed about at night. She was about 5 feet 6 inches tall. It was a tight, cute package with curves in all the right places. Get her mad at you outside of school, and she can swear in Cajun French a mile a minute. Okay, I admit it was nice to see her get upset when her friends told her what I was doing. The smile that appeared on my face when I saw her blush over her comments about our current situations made it clear that I liked it. I added to this when she wore a low-cut blouse that exposed her cleavage while letting out a long, hungry wolf cry. When they heard this in the hallways, everyone realized that Lena was wearing something that made her look very sexy. For the rest of the day, every guy in school tried to visit her. I don't know if she liked the attention, but I thought it was funny. With a beautiful figure of 36 inches, a narrow waist and hips of 34 sizes, I could imagine being hugged by her thighs. I couldn't think of a single sexual act that I couldn't do with her. At times I dreamed of dragging her into the hayloft in my parents' barn. I never expected it to go anywhere because her family was wealthy and mine was not. She had the spirit of a wild horse that had yet to be tamed, if at all possible. She could be passive, aggressive, or dominant depending on her mood. The person who grabbed her will have to be as patient as Job, because it will take a long time to understand her before you can devise a plan that will work to get inside her clothes. The more I studied her, the more I realized what a complex person she was. That's how much her hot little body and personality turned me on. There were times when she caught my eye, although no one noticed that she was doing anything to mock me. We both deliberately played this game to frustrate each other. It took both of us most of the school year to realize how much it worked. Everyone knew I was an ass, and in my eyes there was no one better than what Lena carried. One day, when she noticed me looking at 3 of her friends, she leaned over and waved their butts at me, laughing. Apparently, her mother told her that men who are attracted to butts end up being the most faithful husbands. She made the mistake of telling Karen this, and soon the school believed it was true. We were both going to graduate 12th grade with honors. She was valedictorian, and I took second place. She thought that if they knew what I did outside of school, they wouldn't consider me at all. We just rehearsed our parts for the graduation party on the stage of the auditorium a month later. I had to be there in case she got sick. I knew that she would show up anyway, even if out of spite. There was no way she would let me win by default. We both received huge educational grants. Our last dance before our senior year was this coming Saturday. I planned to attend Southeast Missouri State University in the fall to begin working toward an MBA in agricultural science. As we walked off stage, down the back stairs leading back to the hallway, I put my hand on her soft ass and whispered in her ear, "When are you ready to let me tap that?" She turned around, slapped me in the face, and said, "When hell freezes over the asshole." Since I had nothing to lose and no witnesses, I became a little aggressive out of frustration. I pulled her body towards me and lowered my head, looking into her eyes. At first she fought me, but my determination overcame her. I had one chance to go all in, and I was going to take it. Her eyes widened as I moved closer to her lips and forcibly kissed her deeply and long. I put as much passion and desire into it as I could, thinking that if I was going to pay for it, I would get my money's worth. If this was going to be my first and last kiss with her, I had to make sure it was memorable. After I had a good feel for what I wanted for so long, I let her go in a way that let her know how I felt about her. Her blue eyes reflected her passion, frustration, and anger, so I expected a very big negative reaction. Instead, her answer shocked me. She pushed me hard against the wall and held me tightly. She was just as aggressive as I was. For me, it was a complete delight. I saw how willingly I was giving myself to this hot bitch, and it scared me. Lena showed me that she could be my equal when needed. She could be a tough cookie. I've been waiting most of the school year, Jet King, Lena said, for you to stop talking and do something. I'm glad you finally decided to take courage. I'm glad to hear that, I said. I wish you had told me months ago. Can you please loosen your grip now? Not until you agree that this is exclusive until we decide to break up, Lena said firmly. Dill, you've been the only one I've looked at since you slapped me, I said. I smiled and approached her lips again. This time I showed my tender side by kissing her as gently and slowly as I could. Our kisses were demanding and at the same time searching for discovery. Lena began to examine my slender figure. When we finally left the stairs a few minutes later, because we both thought we heard a noise, we were holding hands. We both knew that our relationship with each other had taken a big step forward. If we had been anywhere but at school, I still believe we were so excited and hot for each other at that moment that we wouldn't have been able to stop. Our mutual attraction to each other over the course of the school year had heightened our feelings to the extreme. We later learned that we were the topic of discussion in the hallways for the rest of the day. It was funny because neither of them had actually met that year. After all, it seemed that we were both waiting for each other. I waited for her at the end of the day to come to the entrance of the school to catch the school bus. She was walking with her best friend when she saw me. It was a real joy for me to see how her eyes sparkled when she looked at me. Without saying a word, she handed me the school books she'd been talking about going home and said, "Can we stop at Dairy Queen and get a milkshake before you take me home?" "You and Jet," Flat Karen said in shock. "When did you finally admit your interest in each other?" If you've ever seen a Flat Karen, you knew what they meant when the boys called her a carpenter's dream because she was straight as a board and had never been nailed down. Sometimes we said she was a pirate's treasure because she had a sunken chest. "I'll call you tonight and explain everything," Lena said as we walked hand in hand to my Jeep Cherokee Sport. We stopped at the Dairy Queen, which was located just behind the police station on the main street of the city. She wanted a blizzard, I wanted a regular cocktail, so I ordered them both in the largest size possible. We went to the city park, sat at one of their picnic tables, and started getting to know each other. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening by the time I dropped her off at my parents' house. Her mother saw me come out and opened the door for her. Her father joined her and looked me over as I approached to ask his permission to take his daughter to the dance on Saturday night. I think my actions shocked him because he didn't seem to know how to react. Lena later told me that he was shocked to find someone our age willing to show such respect. Finally, he gave his consent and offered to shake my hand. Much later, I learned that the respect shown to him said everything about how I was raised. When I asked him for his daughter's hand in marriage a few years later, he had no serious problem with it as long as I agreed with his plans to protect his assets. After Lena walked into her parents' house, I got into the truck and drove to my parents' farm. I couldn't believe I finally kissed the girl of my dreams. My parents immediately realized that something had changed in my life. It was unusual for me to be late after school, so of course I had to answer my mom's question, "Why am I so late?" I just said I had an interesting conversation. My dad, in a private moment, said with a smile, "Who is she and what is her name?" "The redhead I'm taking to the school dance on Saturday night," I explained. "I asked her tonight, that's why I'm so late." From that day on, Lena and I were inseparable. It was on Saturday when my parents left for the city. I was in the hayloft preparing to transport some bales of straw after clearing 4 stalls with the loader on the front of the tractor. I did this once a month, usually on the first Saturday of the month. The horses were driven out to pasture. I had moved everything I needed to the edge of the attic and had just dropped 2 to lay them out on the floor of the counters when I heard Lena's voice calling out to me. "I'm here," I said. "I have 14 more bales to throw before I fall." I started throwing them overboard as quickly as I could, and was almost ready to go down when I saw Lena's head sticking out above the floor. I walked over to greet her as she finished her climb. Funny how much flat space was open among the straw bales. A few moments later, we were lying hugging each other on the straw bales. Our mouths were locked as our hands explored each other's bodies. She soon pulled my t-shirt off, and I had just finished unbuttoning her blouse and was looking forward to dealing with the feel of her beautiful breasts when we were interrupted. Lena and I most likely would have gotten carried away if we hadn't heard my parents honking the horn in the car. My parents, I realized, were trying to get my attention. When we went down the stairs, they were already approaching the barn. Lena and I began spreading straw in the stalls as quickly as we could. My mom and dad found us in one of the stalls, laughing and throwing straws at each other. Curiosity led my parents to the barn. It was enough to see a strange car in the yard, and I wasn't there. They were pleasantly surprised to discover that the visitor to the farm was a pretty girl about my age. It was interesting to see the surprise on my parents' faces when I introduced Lena to them as my girlfriend. I told them that as soon as I laid the floor, I was going to saddle the horses and give her a ride. Mom said, "Before you do that, let's have lunch." Lena volunteered to help her, so they headed back to the house first. "It's good that we managed to save Jet," my father said. "I can't prove anything else happened. Lena was as much prime meat as your mother at that age. Don't do anything to ruin this new relationship because she looks like she's a keeper. Make sure she is good enough to be the mother of your children." My father was a practical man and called it as he saw it. He made some important points in his own way, as if our behavior always had consequences. This is when I learned that my father always loved redheads. Dad helped me finish preparing 4-horse stalls before heading out. By the time we got home, Mom and Lena were well on their way to becoming friends. After lunch, we went on a horseback ride and reached 50 kilometers. With the horses tied to a low branch, we both got a few new grass stains as we leaned against a tree by the bathing pond rising up from where we had been earlier that day. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon when she left to get ready for the school dance. While dancing that night, my cousin Terry overheard Lena telling Flat Karen that she found my sweet and gentle nature attractive. Although the two of us teased and made fun of each other, we never acted on it. "I like people who can control their temper, and Jet always did that," she explained to Karen and my cousin Terry. "Jet can be aggressive when necessary, as I've learned," Lena said. "From what I have learned about him is that his passive nature guides him in everything he does. But when he sets his mind to something, no one can make him back down. He proved it by waiting for me as if I was the one." His cousin Terry told me that when he speaks with authority, most people feel he is speaking in anger, Karen said, because he has a naturally loud and strong voice. So for years he had to train to tone it down. "I would do anything for Jet," Terry said, "just like he would have done for me. Make him angry and you'll find out the hard way that you underestimated him. There are quite a few boys here who crossed his path and ended up bleeding on the ground after he was done with them." When I took her to her last dance of the school year, her parents were surprised when I brought her a corsage because it wasn't a special occasion. They noted that this was the most beautiful place they had ever seen. I explained that I made it from plants that were part of a small nursery my dad and I started on the farm. "I made it in neutral colors so it would go with anything," I said. They seemed very impressed. God, she looked so sexy in that tight white summer dress that showed off her curves so brilliantly. It was so short that it barely covered the bottom of her panties. She had nice breasts, and in the low-cut dress her cleavage stood out, to my delight. Every damn slow dance she pressed herself against me. More than once I had to go to the bathroom just to change the position of a certain part of my body because it was causing me to tense up all night. For everyone present, there was no doubt that we were now a couple. I think she upset the hell out of me that night as some sort of payback for what we had done to each other during the school year. Towards the end of the summer, we often spent time in the hayloft. My mom and I talked for a long time after she found my stash of condoms hidden in the back of a drawer. It was then that she decided to have a long talk with the lady who she hoped would be her future daughter-in-law. I should have realized what was said because shortly after, Lena told me she was taking the pill. The mother got her 2 cents in one night at dinner when she said, "The horses seem to be enjoying the stalls a lot more lately and have gotten a lot more playful in the pasture. I wonder if this is because the straw has taken on a new smell." I almost choked on my food and started coughing. My father looked up and said, "I missed something." My father noticed my interest in gardening as a child and encouraged me to pursue it. Under his leadership, we turned 20 acres of our 250-acre farm into a Christmas tree farm. We bought the tiny trees cheaply with a reforestation grant after we figured out what type of tree was best for the Christmas market. Every spring break, we spent an entire week planting rows and rows of new seedlings for the product. It was a bonding time for my father and me. About 2 weeks before planting, we tilled the area to begin preparing it. Depending on the weather, we did this 3 or 4 times before leveling the area. This made landing quick and easy. As a result, we have already started promoting the first harvest, ready for sale next season. We had about 400 trees about 8 feet tall. The only thing we had to do was cut them down to fit the retail customer perfectly. We even found that he knew which farm they came from. In 6th grade, my father, recognizing my interest in growing plants, realized that if I got serious about it, we would need to find a way to replenish the topsoil. The city of Jackson and my father agreed that they would bring all the yard waste they collected to the site we had set aside for mass production of topsoil. Our neighboring city of Cape Girardeau soon entered into a similar agreement due to convenience and significant cost savings. At least twice a month from an early age, I would spend a full day or two shredding branches, twigs, and other materials to turn them into mulch, which we would then sift through large screens to separate out non-biodegradable materials that needed to be burned in barrels. The ashes from these items were scattered along the edge of our property because we wanted the final product to be as clean as possible. When the pile reached a certain size, we added chemicals to speed up the rotting process and kept it moist. We turned the pile once or twice a month to provide airflow and keep it loose. Local building contractors soon learned that they could dump clean excess soil on our site for free. Much of this soil was the Missouri red clay variety. Using chemicals in large quantities designed to speed up decay, we mixed this soil with the biodegradable mulch we created. Over time, this business took over several acres. The key was to keep the soil breathable and moist. We did not intend for some of the soil donated to us to be used to level the ground on which we built our greenhouses after removing the topsoil. It took us 18 months to transform the useless soil, good only for making bricks, into high-quality topsoil. We used it to start new plants in our greenhouses and sold some directly to the retail market in 10-pound bags. In the first 3 years, we earned enough to build 2 large, long-glass greenhouses heated with natural gas in the winter. Both were filled with flowers grown to be sent to local wholesalers as needed. Using multiple PVC pipes and an expanding hose system, we designed an automatic overhead sprinkler system. We applied the same principles to watering our crops. Excess water was collected through a drainage system my father built in the concrete floor and reused. Thus, any fertilizer lost during daily watering was retained and used again by adding 50% new water. We have found this to be a very effective way to reduce costs and avoid having to have a pond to collect water due to excess fertilizer in the water. Over the summer, we built 4 more greenhouses to grow white and red poinsettias for the Christmas season, bringing the total to 10. My father believed that with this extra income, I would be able to graduate from college debt-free. I still remember the first time Lena saw our operation. This helped her understand why I chose this field for my career. My father told her that it was my curious nature that helped lead this business to success. Jet asked questions, my father said, which made me think. After discussion with the wife and with her blessing, the family went ahead with it. It has now become a major source of income and is growing steadily. What did the farm do before? Lena asked. Raised livestock. my father explained, which, as you probably know, with market fluctuations, can be good or bad depending on wholesale prices. By the time I graduated from university, we had 22 long greenhouses measuring 240 feet long, 40 feet wide, and 9 feet high. We shipped high-quality organic produce weekly. Our customers demanded more products, so we expanded again. Two of our greenhouses grew leaf lettuce for a chain of grocery stores, two more grow bok choy, and two grow English cucumbers. We had 20 employees and continued to grow. Our products were grown without chemicals, sold as organic, and commanded a higher purchase price from wholesalers. As a result, we made very good money. As expected, I joined the family business and started it full-time. Lena became a family physician and joined a group associated with Southeast Missouri Hospital. A week after receiving my license, I proposed to her. 3 months later, we got married in a hurry because she was pregnant with our daughter. Our two sons were born 1 year apart. From the day we got married, Lena was spoiled by my parents. They felt the sun rise and set on it. Mom was delighted to become a grandmother and became our nanny. Our children have given her an important new purpose in life. To this day, children reflect the moral values that she helped instill in them. We had just celebrated our 14th anniversary when my cousin Terry and his wife Karen took me over to a family barbecue. They couldn't help but notice that Lena seemed to take control of our relationship because I seemed too passive and relaxed. It seems many of our mutual friends have begun to worry about our future as a couple. The way Lena treats you sometimes, Jet, Karen said, makes it seem like she treats you like a second-class citizen and takes advantage of you until she finds what she's looking for. To put it bluntly, cousin, Terry said, Lena may say she still loves you, but we all think she's lost all respect for you as a man. She acts like a mother who is tired of being a mother even to you. I was going to defend her like a husband should when someone criticizes his wife, but my cousin and his wife stopped me. Jet, Lena constantly complains about what you don't do. She seems to make a big deal out of every little thing, Karen said. You don't argue or quarrel. You've softened your voice so much that she can't hear you at all. You see her complaints and get annoyed because you consider them whining. This has resulted in you no longer listening to what she has to say. You've been more focused on updating and modernizing your business than your marriage. Your marriage isn't equal because it's run by Lena's rules and you're just following her, Terry said. Lena uses your softness and character to increase her dominance over you without realizing it. You were just too blind to notice. Each of you pushes the other away in your own way, Terry said. You work long hours because you don't want to go home, but you don't admit it. Lena, in her own way, finds excuses to do the same. Some of our mutual friends believe that she has developed a romantic interest outside of marriage. Later, I was busy doing something on the flat-top grill in preparation for dinner when Lena asked me to bring something. I thought seriously about what Terry and Karen said. After rethinking our marriage, I finally came to the conclusion that in many ways they were right. Hearing my cousin and his wife, I said, "Can't you see I'm busy? Why don't you take it yourself or send one of our children? For too long you have treated me as your servant. Honestly, I'm tired of being your doormat." The look of shock on my wife's face spoke volumes. Lainey finally heard a voice that I thought had disappeared. Everyone within earshot fell silent because I sounded like I was angry. Lena turned and went into the house to get it herself, feeling like a loser for the first time in a long time. "Dad, what happened to you?" asked my 13-year-old daughter, Luna. "I have reached a point where I can no longer stand the feeling of being considered your mother's servant," I replied so that everyone could hear me. "If your mother doesn't change her attitude towards me, we'll have some tough months ahead." Everyone present received an awakening. I realized that for most of our marriage, I turned the other cheek because to me it wasn't worth the fighting. I made it so easy for my wife that she could walk on me like a rug. That night, Lena and I had a serious fight. I admit it was long overdue. I ended up sleeping on the couch that night. At the end of the argument, Lena said, "You don't even understand how unnecessary you are." and that's when I exploded. We argued in the street so that the children would not hear. I grabbed Lena in pure anger. He turned her over his knee and spanked her, like our child when he misbehaved. She went into the bedroom crying with a very red bottom and locked the door so I couldn't come in. To say that Lena tiptoed around me the next morning would be putting it mildly. Lena was just shocked by the new reality. After my wife and kids left the next morning, I returned from the large office near the greenhouses to see what I could find. The reason I did this was because, as I was lying on the couch trying to figure out when our marriage started to change, I remembered that it happened 8 years ago, a couple of months after my mother died. After a thorough search of her side of the bedroom, I found a bracelet with a bunch of little charms on it. The problem was that it was made entirely of 18-fold gold, and I didn't buy it for her. The charms were so overtly sexual that she could never wear them in public. I knew that her lover had ordered them because they were very expensive. I quietly put it in my pocket to evaluate it. This added credibility to Karen and Terry's suspicions. I went back to the office and was very quiet. When they asked me what happened, I simply said that I had a lot on my mind because it was the truth. At about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, while one of the office staff was in my office, I asked her to call the group my wife worked with and see if they were accepting new clients. "Jet, I'd love to do it, but may I ask why?" Fiona asked. "For personal reasons, I need to check my wife's actual work schedule," I said. "I've heard some rumors that I need to debunk." "So someone finally got the courage to tell you what we've been hearing for months," Fiona said as she left the office. Fiona, Karen's sister, was a military widow who joined our company while her husband was serving. Now she raised her daughter alone. I often wondered why she couldn't find another man. Fiona was the complete opposite of her sister. She was a beauty. My wife, in all the years of our marriage, was the only woman who attracted my attention, but after seeing what Fiona had to offer in her femininity, I realized that I was still too young to start over. The freedom of knowing that I had other options brought peace to my state of mind. Even though I had known her for years through Terry and Karen, I didn't pay her much attention. For some reason, I felt the excitement of the unknown again. It was a revelation for me. When she returned, the information she provided was quite revealing. Her work schedule did not coincide at all with the fact that I was misled. Instead of working every Thursday and Friday until 10 o'clock every week, she only did it once a month, like all the other doctors in their office. Fiona and I chatted for a few minutes. She tried to ask questions without making it obvious. I don't know if she understood, but she planted some thoughts that gave me hope for the future. This left a lot of time unaccounted for. It was shocking to learn that she only worked half a day on Wednesdays. Now the question was, what did she do with all this free time? 8 years ago, when cancer took my mother, both my father and I were surprised to learn that she had left her shares of the family business to me in trust for her 3 grandchildren. When I was young, they sold most of the farm at an inflated price to a corporation, leaving 10 acres around the house in their name and 10 in mine. The corporation paid off the mortgage in 10 years with interest. They gave the land to Len and me as a wedding gift. Lena and I used this land to build our house. Dad had a hard time with the loss of his wife, and for several months after that he withdrew into himself. During this time, I became president of the company, and Dad semi-retired to become our first CEO. He still came in 3 mornings a week to stay on top of things and act as an advisor. I knew I had a large business trip ahead of me that required my presence at 8 different corporate offices to renew contracts that required my signature. They were all multi-year deals with a built-in product price range that gave us room to grow costs. Since this was a 3-country trip, I will be away for at least 3 weeks. Both my father and I still headed our company, which now employed over 100 people. We now had over 48 greenhouses, all operating at full capacity. Fortunately, in my first year of full-time work, I checked the site for underground water veins, and we found one that would supply all our needs for many years. By turning off the city water at that time, we reduced our overall costs by $10,000 a month. An added bonus was that we discovered a large natural gas pocket, and since the land had been in the family for many generations, we learned that we still owned the mineral rights. After negotiations with large companies, we were provided with. Even after paying for our gas consumption, we received a hefty royalty check from them every month. My cousin Terry, our chief financial officer, came into my office to update our latest cash flow report, which showed that we had our biggest year-over-year growth. At that moment, I told him what I had found. He was just as shocked as I was when he looked at it closely. "It looks like her lover is a rich man. What are you planning to do, Jet?" Terry asked. "Are you sending someone else to sign the contracts?" "No, I'll go pretending I don't know anything," I said. "This will give the private detectives I am going to hire enough time to find out who my wife's lover is." "Why? It won't change the situation in divorce court. This is an equal property rights state," Terry said. "Leonard LeBlanc, Lena's father, was and still is a cunning bastard," I said. "Before the wedding, he made us sign a prenuptial agreement. I think Lena has already forgotten about him." "Why did he do this?" Terry asked. "He has millions from fracking." "To protect her daughter from me so that I don't get part of her inheritance," I said. "If we divorce because of infidelity, the guilty party will walk away with minimal assets." The mood of the house changed greatly that night. My wife seemed to show respect that I hadn't seen in years. I think we both realized that our relationship has changed a lot. Lena was no doubt trying to figure out what I might know. Interestingly, my father decided that morning to go on a 2-week fishing trip with his childhood friends. They tried to persuade him for years, but he always found excuses. He left before I returned. During his absence, Lena was at home much more often. It seemed suspicious and left me with the feeling that there was something going on in his life that he didn't want me to know. A few days later, my daughter called me and told me that Mom was desperately looking for something missing and had interviewed all 3 of our children. "Dad, Mom accused us all of going into your bedroom and going through her drawers," Luna said. "Whatever she lost must be very important because I thought she would cry." When I got home that night, I asked Lena about it, and she insisted it was nothing important. When I told her what our daughter had told me, Lena said that Luna must have misunderstood and that she would clarify it after dinner. At dinner that night, I gave her the same look I gave her when I teased her in high school. This time, her mood changed greatly, and she fell silent. I assumed that Lena now believed that I knew about the affair. After dinner, while she was putting the boys to bed, my daughter asked me what was going on. "Luna, I'm not sure," I said. "People have told me something, and if it's true, we're in for a tough time because it's going to take time to get over this. Remember, this is not because of you or your brothers. It's been 3 weeks since I discovered the charm bracelet. 16 charms were valued at $8,000 each. The platinum used with the gold in the bracelet made it worth $20,000. Whoever gave it to her had it commissioned from one of the most famous jewelers in the business. Since each charm was unique, they were likely purchased for special moments or events in their relationship. Assuming she received 2 charms a year for her birthday and anniversary, that works out to about 8 years. I didn't want to believe it, but the circumstantial evidence pointed in a direction I didn't want to consider. So I changed my schedule to make a stop and get the information I needed. I booked a hotel room in St. Louis to get a full report from the private investigators before continuing my trip. Then my worst fears were confirmed. My wife's lover for almost 8 years was a man I had known all my life. It was my father. The private detectives provided me with a written report and a flash drive with all the files. After the gentleman left with full payment, I read the entire printed report. It was so detailed that I almost vomited. Luckily, I bought a couple of bottles of scotch at duty-free on the way back from Canada and drank more than a couple of strong shots while reading it. Plucking up my courage, I called my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law, Leonard LeBlanc, and asked for his personal email address. Leonard was a proud man who never attended church. He had his own views on life and what was right and wrong. Like it or not, he had to respect the man for living by them his entire life. To have his support meant everything. "Why should I do this?" Leonard asked. "Because I want you to know what's coming," I said. "Because you wouldn't believe it if you heard it from me. This is the file that was given to me a couple of hours ago. It cost me $6,000. After receiving it, I sent the file through the laptop and waited for the call that was about to arrive. Leonard LeBlanc looked like Gomer Pyle when they first met. He was over 6 feet tall, but just as gangly and clumsy. He was the son of an alligator hunter who made a fortune. With his simple words and clumsy movements, he looked like a fool. Many fell into his trap, underestimating his brilliant mind. When he was interested in something, he studied it inside and out. Many CEOs were shocked when he signed the complex deal, realizing that he had been with them for 6 months. When he acquired the corporation, he already knew how to improve its profitability and productivity. Using their weaknesses against them, he had already shaved millions off their original price. As soon as my cell phone rang, I answered. As expected, it was my father-in-law. "Damn it, Jet," Leonard said. "You were right. If you told me, I would call you the biggest liar in the country. How bad is it?" "I will treat them the same way you would," I said. "There will be no mercy for them." "Don't blame you one bit, son," he said. "I would burn anyone for what they did. Just promise me that you won't do anything until we meet and talk somewhere where we can't be recorded." Leonard LeBlanc was a religious man who never attended church. He had his own views on life and what was right and wrong. Like it or not, he had to respect the man for living by them his entire life. To have his support meant everything. "Dad, how about the boys and I go fishing the first Sunday after I get back?" I asked. "You can call your daughter and make arrangements tonight if she's home." He laughed and said, "I like this. It will kill two birds with one stone. One of the things I need to know is what made you suspicious." "I found a bracelet with a bunch of charms that was appraised and found out it was custom made," I said. "Last Monday, while I was in Montreal, I arranged for it to be sent to my wife from Paris. It will be delivered by courier one piece at a time with a note. I will contact you and your lover at an appropriate time to find out the price of my silence. She must receive all 16 pieces before I return." "Jesus, Jet, she's going to be a nervous wreck just like him," Lena's father said. "For what?" "This will give me time to find a buyer for my shares in the corporation, because I'm going to sell my father's dream," I said, "because it's the only thing that hurts him the same way he hurt me." "This will keep them mentally stressed for a while," I explained. "Their fears will increase as my return date approaches." "How much longer do you have left on this trip?" Leonard asked. "I have 2+ weeks left in the hotel," I said. "From the day the first courier note arrives, they will be like the walking dead." "It would be easier if they really died," Leonard said. "They died as if in an accident." After he hung up, I relaxed, knowing that Leonard LeBlanc wouldn't wait another minute. Being a man from the swamps, he knew ways to solve issues without anyone asking questions. I was in downtown New York, staying at the Trump Hotel, enjoying a fantastic dinner at one of the restaurants with some businessmen I did business with. Luckily, I was supposed to be home on Friday. I was still sitting at the table when the detectives came to me with unpleasant news. It was already past 9 in the evening. My father was dead. I was shocked. I had to ask what happened. It turned out that my wife and he decided to go for a swim in the back 50 acres of pond where Lena and I often hung out when we first started dating. They went horseback riding on Wednesday afternoon while the kids were at school and decided to cool off. Dad went into the water first because the day was hot. Local authorities believe someone released an alligator into the pond a couple of years ago, and it adapted to its new home. My father's body was discovered by divers after they killed the alligator. The three of us realized that these were not just circumstances. My wife Lena was fine, but had severe emotional problems. Seeing her father-in-law die before her eyes shocked her greatly. Our children stayed with their grandparents until Lena coped with the situation. I returned to my desk and explained to those present what I had learned, then excused myself to attend to personal matters. As I walked back to my room, I couldn't help but think that I never wanted to get on Leonard LeBlanc's bad side. I wonder what he has in mind for his daughter. After making myself a strong drink, I called. Leonard answered immediately. As children, was the first question. Okay, not too bad, he replied in his slang. They are upset, but not more than I would consider normal for their age. If they are still awake, can I talk to them? I asked. I spent the next hour talking to all three of my kids before they handed the phone to Grandpa. From what Lena could explain, Leonard said, "Your father drowned because the alligator pulled him into the deep water." "Thank you, Dad," I said seriously. "I will arrive first thing on Saturday to begin funeral arrangements. I think I'd better call my wife and see how she's coping." "Sounds like a good idea, because at times like these you need to keep up appearances," he said before saying goodbye. I called Lena, and the reports were confirmed. She was in a complete nervous breakdown. It was difficult to have a conversation with her because she couldn't stop crying. She couldn't understand how they could not have noticed the alligator earlier, since they were swimming on Wednesdays every time. I asked if it was normal for them to swim naked together. Lena went into an emotional breakdown and hung up. Now she knew that I knew the truth. The next morning, I was at a business meeting when the same two detectives came after me with more bad news. It turned out that after my wife got drunk trying to drown her sorrows, there was a gas explosion that destroyed part of the house. She was unable to escape and was crushed by the debris. I came in and asked to speed up the process since I needed to fly out as soon as possible. Luckily, they understood, and I got a better offer than I expected. I was lucky to catch the last flight to the Cape that night. Descending from the 12-seater plane, I saw that my father-in-law was waiting for me. "My wife and I expect you and the kids to stay with us until things are sorted out," he said. "This will give you time to organize and sort everything out." "How is Mom coping?" I asked. "It was hard for her until the police told us this afternoon that she was your father's mistress for years," Dad said. "They confirmed their suspicions by finding the blackmail notes Lena received in your father's office." "That's interesting," I said. "It must have bothered them." What shocked them was the discovery of a bracelet with 16 different erotic amulets, all undressed, Lena's father added. "This can be seen as a model of what lovers did back then. Of course, they plan to talk to you when they finish their investigation." "How do you suggest I go about meeting them?" I asked. "Direct and honest. Take with you the prenuptial agreement and the private investigator's report. Give it to them right away. It will prove that you had no motive to set them up." I smiled because he reminded me that until a death was proven accidental, it would be considered suspicious. The more open I am, the less likely they are to think it's murder. Dad and I went to the funeral home together to pick out coffins. We decided to use closed coffins for both. I then contacted Terry at the office, letting him know that the contracts had been signed and that I would be taking a few days off. The funeral and reception were well attended. I think my kids handled it well considering the circumstances. I held on as best I could, but there were times when I showed my emotions. Most believed that they had a closer relationship than normal people, but no one spoke about it publicly. The detectives waited respectfully until the fire department filed a final report on the cause of the gas explosion in my home. They concluded that the cause was a faulty installation carried out while I was away. I was advised that with this report, I could sue the gas company for wrongful death and loss of my home. They were unable to find any evidence that could indicate when the alligator appeared in the pond. I showed them the prenuptial agreement and the private investigator's report. Using my father-in-law's printer, I made a copy for them to take with them. They thanked me for disclosing the information, as it resolved any remaining issues that might have arisen in reviewing their final report and conclusion of the case. Dad and I were sitting on the back patio, drinking a bottle of beer, discussing my interview with the detectives, when he said, "My wife and I will change our will, leaving everything to the children in a living trust that you will control until they are 30. Do you want to know if I had anything to do with what happened? Dad, it doesn't matter, I replied. Karma gave them what they deserved. Let's leave it like that. Leonard smiled and said, I always knew you were a smart person who knew what to say at the right time. The kids and I were at Macy's doing some big shopping that left me stunned when I ran into Fiona. We moved into my father's house until mine was restored. This was long needed and urgent. She offered to help. Fiona, we're buying things because we have nothing left, I said. Let me introduce you to my 3 children, Luna, Leon, and Levi. We decided to start with the boys. After we found out what they liked and didn't like, we started. We bought enough underwear for 2 weeks. T-shirts, jeans, shirts, jackets, and other clothes. As soon as I could, I paid for what we chose and took it to the car. By the time we finished, I had made 6 trips to the car and was exhausted. The last trip was to buy new shoes. Dad, why don't Fiona come with us to our temporary home? The children said. Then she can come back with you and help you choose a new wardrobe. I don't want your father to think I'm interfering, she said. That's none of my business. Dad, Luna said firmly, I think you should agree and then invite her to dinner to show how much we appreciate her help. That's what we did. After we unloaded our things and dropped off the kids, we returned and she helped me choose my wardrobe. Altogether, it took 4 hours, so I invited Fiona to dinner. After her consent, I called Lena and got her approval, then ordered their favorite pizza for delivery. When I returned, the children asked the main question, Dad, will you ask her out on a real date? This was a question that had yet to be answered. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.